Mark, wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing us to come to your studio. So you work from home, basically. We are safer at home, that's the order, and you work from home at the moment, right?
At the moment, yeah, I've got a little studio. We're in my studio. It's, I don't know, maybe 10 feet by 13 feet. You want to see it?
Yes, I'd love to see it. Thank you so much.
I may switch. Oops. So this is my paints. When I heard that San Francisco got closed down, I was like, maybe we're going to get closed down. And so I had these smaller easels brought in, and so I can spin this guy and paint. And then there's the hallway. When we had kids, this is where Jen started a studio on the 3rd floor and had this easel made, and this is one of her early abstractions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is where I've got some paintings drying. This one on the right is pretty good. I like them both. And then up there is the observatory.
Oh, now I know where you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Another one. And then here are some works that are drying.
Do you go every morning from downstairs to upstairs, and do you have a daily routine?
You know, for the first month, it was every day. And these are more of Jen's paintings. And Lothar Hempel, and this is a Jonas wood that I bought back in the day for like, I don't know, $1,200.
That's beautiful.
And these are some more of my paintings that are drying. And I'm not using slugs right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not. That's another Jonas. That's from the first house that we lived in. To answer your question, for the first month, I was working 7 days a week. And
yeah.
What was really nice, because I used to live in my studio. And so I would.
Yeah. Oops, now you're frozen.
I no longer wanted to, once I didn't live in my studio, I didn't want to have my art at home. I wanted to be free of it. And I wanted to be free of it. And so it's been interesting to come back and be able to work in the daytime, have dinner, hang out with the kids, and then come up and hit the paintings for an hour or two before I go to bed. That was really nice. Mm-hmm. That was really, really nice, and a new way of working. And so I could have a clean palette, a clean visual palette, to have that time and come here and tinker and work in very specific ways. And that was really nice.
And you did that the first month, you said. What are you doing now?
The first month, I took a week off so I could do business, and I'm getting interested in architecture. And so I'm trying to build some stuff, and there's like conservation easements and caucuses and people that don't want to see the kind of shapes I want to build. And it's been really, I mean, to say it was frustrating would be an understatement. It's really difficult. I mean, it's interesting, and it's a privilege to be able to go through this process, but it's really, really difficult.
So you are very, very active. Was there a time where you just like basically put a pause button and thought about everything? Or did that put you right away into an activation mode and say, now I'm productive?
No, it was activation mode, because like we didn't know what was going on. So it was like, my adrenaline went up, and it was like, there was so much to do. There's so much to organize, so much work to do. And it was like, it's a pandemic. What does this look like? I mean, it wasn't philosophical, but how do we attack this realistically? What does the studio look like now? Does everybody go home? Yes. But do we have to have some security? Yes, we do. How are my parents? Do my parents do they have masks? How are my kids? Like, Jen and I are no longer a couple. What does it look like having the kids from one house to the next? She moves her boyfriend in, makes that pod safe. I move my girlfriend in, make that pod safe. It was like, it was a call to action, you know?
Mm.
And then like, I mean, they're changing dynamics just straight out in the house, you know, and that changes. So for the most part, for me personally, it's been very productive. But you know, like everybody else, there have been some moments where I was down and also just sick of it. Like enough already.
Yeah, I want to thank you. As many know, you are on the board of MOCA, and in a crisis like this, you have been so available for me, and we talk, and we have actually never talked so much like in the last 8 weeks, and you are at all the meetings and you're supporting. A big thank you. And even doing the studio visit now on a weekend, it's really great. Thank you. So I thought a bit about, you and I have only worked with each other through the MoMA collection. I installed very early on works of yours at the museum in, not so early, 2004. I just looked it up because I couldn't, it was actually my first show at MoMA. And I know you're a big fan of MoMA PS1, but we have not worked so much with each other in the past. And I was wondering to just basically also use this opportunity. When I do a studio visit, I normally ask a first question. And the first question is always, when did you know that you would be an artist, or you had to be an artist, or when did that occur to you? Because I think in primary school, we're all artists, but then some of us really are artists.
Right. I mean, I could never draw. I could not draw a person. I can't draw a bunny. I'm still not good at that. But I did designs, and color, and you know, I had like tracing, like where you could trace a circle or square, and so I really was interested in certain kinds of geometry. And then in high school, I had a teacher that showed me Kandinsky, and that opened it up to that the work I was making could be art and not just designs. But so I majored in art as an undergraduate, but I think I was still wondering, like, when am I going to go back to school and get my pre-med? And then I lived in the city in San Francisco for a couple years, and then went to Berkeley for grad, and it was like, you know, like, well, I knew I was going to go for it. I knew once I graduated, I was going to go to New York, or I was going to go to Los Angeles, and I was going to be an artist. There was just like, what were my options at that point? Like, what were my options as like a person, like, that offered me the potential of having like this kind of an interesting life? And so I think at sometime there, I knew that that's what I was going to do.
I know your service and on the board of the museum is a bit like what you started your career. You are a person who thinks about the artist community and supports the artist community. In 1996, when you moved to Los Angeles, you actually started an artist-run space, room 702.
Right. I opened it with Brent Peterson, who was at Berkeley. I was a grad student, he was undergrad, and I had more in common with him than I did with anybody that I was going to school with. And so when I came down here, he was at UCLA, and at the time there were maybe 3 galleries and that showed young artists. But pretty much, if you didn't go to one of the main schools, you were not going to get a show. And kind of, and this is just the way it felt when I moved down there. If you didn't have like a big famous artist with his arm or her arm around you saying you were good, then you for sure weren't going to get a solo show. So we felt like we had a better eye than anybody else. And so we were going to open up a space, and we were going to give solo shows to artists, to first-time artists. That was our goal, solo shows only. And what we said is, if we don't find enough good artists, we'll just show our own work 24/7. And then as it turned out, there were for sure enough artists. And it was working with artists was great, because all they want to do is work. All they want to do is work and explore their own work. And then I got to be the facilitator of that. It was so much fun. And in a lot of ways, it took care of a lot of my conceptual needs in terms of working in a way that was outside of myself.
That's amazing, because I think when you start in such an opportunity, giving opportunities to other artists, I did some research because I didn't know the space then. I was already a curator, but I wasn't aware of it. But it must have been quite successful, and you were even offered a better location and a better space. What made you decide to pursue your own career?
We did get invited to move with Acme and Mark Fox and Dan Bernier. I mean, we were successful. We had big openings. We had top shelf liquor, but like we sold Evan Holloway's work for $20 a drawing. So we were able to pay for our keg and maybe, but not never. I don't think we ever were able to cover rent and the whole thing, but I was living there anyway. What was the question? When did I decide to?
I am inserting a question. Who were other artists you worked with at the time?
Kristen Calabrese, Jason Meadows.
Amazing.
We tried to show Ruby Neri. We had some of her work in the flat files. Pentti Monkonen. Who else did we have? Eric Wesley was someone that we were, but then we had a show like every 2 months, and then we got invited to move, and then I had to think, like, do I want to be a galleryist or do I want to be an artist? And I just thought, like, as an old man, I would prefer to be in the garden and in the studio. And I have huge social phobia. So when you are a galleryist, you never know who's going to walk in the door. And I prefer the protection of when you come in, I know you're coming in.
Great, that's great. Perhaps we start looking through the slides, because together you and I, we prepared like a slideshow, chronological, and I would like to have a look at the first works. We can actually go to the first one. You want to say a bit about this one?
Yeah, okay. So at the time, from undergrad, I was doing kind of Boslets, Basquiat work, but it was political in nature, kind of like Liam Golub talking about American intervention in Central America. But the only way you would know what I was talking about is if I told you, or if I wrote something, because otherwise there was no way. And so I said, I'm not going to paint like that anymore. And I started looking at people that were using painting and drawing to communicate effectively. Now here there are some words, but and we don't have to go back, but the one with the Korean writing is, if you do not speak Korean, you know that there is beer there. And because there's a picture of beer. And so it's like they knew what they wanted to communicate, and they know, I mean, it's also, okay, there's also the English, but they knew who they wanted to talk to, and they knew what they wanted to say. And I love that directness. I just love the directness of it. And so I started copying them.
And so you basically went to these stores and you traded the original sign for a Mark Grotjahn sign. So here we see
yes,
the original. I hope the guys and the store owners kept those Mark Grotjahn. So
I don't know. What I can say is I first just started doing little paintings and then show it in my studio and have critiques, but I just felt like their signs were better than mine. And what made their signs better than mine was they had the context, they had the audience. And so I wanted their audience, I wanted their context. So if I could get my work in their gallery, in their space, then I could communicate properly. And so in this case, I bumped up the materials a little bit. Theirs was on cardboard and falling apart, and then I put mine on some thin wood and made it bright so there would be some incentive. And this was very close to my house. And I don't know, I used to say like 2,000 people a day would see it. I don't know if that's true, but a lot of people saw it and understood it.
So so basically you upgraded their signs. So, so here you come with the new Mark Grotjahn sign, and you're changing it for the old ones. What did store owners, what did they say? Basically, were they just happy they got a new sign?
You know, I loved it because there's just such an intense moment of a different interaction. So it depended, but for the most part, it was like, okay, something weird's going on. Why do you want to do this? I would explain I was an artist, and then they'd be like, okay, make the change and kind of go. We've got our customers to deal with. But sometimes, like, especially with the guy on the right, like, I got to really spend a lot of time in the liquor store, and I saw like where they kept their gun and stuff like that, and it was really fun. And I kind of got to work on the cuff there. But sometimes it's like you waste time. What do you do? You know, what are you doing? Just in and out. But my success rate was huge. For sure, it was more than 9 out of 10.
Just to do a little bit a description here of what we see in the photos. So there is Mark with glasses in his 20s. On the inside, you're in a liquor store where you just you got like VIP access, even seeing the on the left you are with glasses in an ice cream store.
That's the penny saver market. Yes.
Do some of these works sometimes show up on the art market and somebody says,
never.
I have an early Mark Grotjahn from the 90s?
Never.
Okay.
Never. But for 20 years, you could find some of them still in the stores, but I don't know that any still exist.
So here we have
that's my studio. That's interesting. The one on the right with Penny Saver Market was my apartment. And then the one on the left is my studio, my grad studio.
Where was your studio at the time?
It was in Berkeley. So this is when I was in grad school. It was in Berkeley, but it was actually in Richmond, and we were on the water, like where the EPA was, and it was really amazing. Like all the PhDs from Berkeley out there, and we were on the water. It was incredible.
Beautiful. Going to the next slide. It's amazing to see the transformation and the dislocation and relocation of these signs.
Yeah.
So here you have like the hot dog 125.
Yeah.
And then you have a whole series here. And I go one further.
Yeah, this is called No, No, No. And a lot of these were like no browsing or this is not a library. That's how they guard the pornography. The one place in like kind of the mom and pop that they feel okay disciplining you is if you're looking at pornography, which they're selling, or if you want to borrow money.
Or if you have no ID in a liquor store, no ID, no beer.
No beer, no liquor, no wine. It's just, yes. This is great.
So all of these, did you also exchange them?
Yes.
Did you make a new leaf all backs at the front and then you brought it?
Yes.
That was kind of like a very conceptual exercise in mapping a community, because you basically met all the small stores. And so when you moved away, you must have known everybody there.
I mean, you know, it was kind of in and out, but I felt I personally, I can't speak for them, I felt a deep connection to the places that I went, a deep connection to these signs individually. I knew where each one was from. I knew exactly how everything went down. Yeah, no reading aloud.
Here.
Yeah, it was a great experience, like in terms of, you know, you're told that art can be whatever you want. This was kind of, art could be whatever. It went from an idea to an actuality. The exchanges with the store owners, in some ways, was at least as interesting as getting my work in their space.
Yeah, and I like the ready-made idea of the bottle rack and the liquor store and the Pepsi Cola. So the bottle rack goes into the museum, and here's the Pepsi Cola sign goes into the gallery setting. So these works, Who owns them today?
I own all of them.
You own all of them?
Yeah. Except for No, No, No. No, No, No was bought by Wilhelm Schumann. He was the only one. When I came down to LA, I was just like, everybody's gonna love my conceptual work. That was not my experience. Although I think it, to the artist, I think it meant something.
I think the Wilhelm Schürmann has a lot of Kippenberger. And
yes.
The No, 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 it's like between Polke, Kippenberger, between conceptual painting. I completely see that work making sense in connection.
Yeah.
Next one.
I mean, there's one, it holds flowers. The pink one holds flowers. Yep. Oh, okay, so this is Blum and Poe.
We go back.
I don't know. We don't need to. I mean, the pink one holds flowers. The other ones hold fruit. This one holds, the one in the foreground held magazines, Polish magazines mainly. It was for a brief period in the 90s where I lived in Williamsburg. And so it was, the dimensions were specific for the things that were being sold. And then they're angled at certain, it's just like the formal devices the formal devices supported not the object, that supported the function.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to this slide because this week you and I, we reduced it from like an incredible amount of slides to only like around 100 now, but still it's 100 slides. But I think this is an important, there is later in the slideshow, there is an installation view of Anton Kern Gallery where you have sculptural work and you have painting work. And I felt this is actually an important slide to look at a little longer, because I think these, you say display, whatever, furniture, did you consider them sculpture and did you preserve them?
Yeah, I still have them. I still own them.
That's amazing.
And they're on wheels, so you can bring them in and out of the store. But I think one of the things that maybe you're saying is like some of my formal drives carry through the bodies of work.
Exactly.
And I think that's really true. I mean, this is actually there's a lot of minimalism here, and in a way, like there's the No, No, No piece, and then the other long sign, it's very maximal.
Yeah,
I think I work both ways.
I think the conceptual approach, and also think about Franz West, think about Passstücke, think about sculpture that is made to have a function. Furniture is in correspondence to the body. I think these are such important works. So I wanted to have those and everybody for a second look at them, and now then we go to the other works. But I will remind everybody of that slide. So here, that's Blum and Poe 2002. That's a different chapter, right?
This is a different chapter. I'm solidly living in LA. I had closed, or the gallery stopped. Brent continued as a gallerist. There had been one show between this where I did the very brightly colored 3-tier perspectives. It got written about in a way that I was deliberately trying to make bad work. I think that people didn't understand the colors that I was using or what I was trying to do. And so I was pretty angry. It was like I finally got like, I don't know, my 10th bad review in a row. And I finally got pissed off. And I was like, I will make paintings using the colors that you think are sophisticated, and I will show you what I can do. And so that was kind of why I went towards black and white, or off black and off white. That was a driving force. Once I started making the paintings, the beauty of the paintings for me carried me through several years.
You mentioned Malevich in the beginning, and you also described them as perspectives. When I first looked at the butterflies, they were, when you do in school or in architecture school or later, you do perspective drawings, you have always these what we call Fluchtpunkte. You have always points of orientation where you orient the perspective on. And so those butterflies have that. Do you want to say a bit about where those paintings took their origin? Like thinking about perspective and thinking about these more monochrome works here?
Well, they came out of, while I was in the gallery, like I said, working with other artists took care of a lot of my conceptual needs. And so I started thinking about, why did I get involved in art in the first place? And it was like color and line. I loved color and line. I was drawn to that. All of a sudden, that seemed like an absolutely acceptable position to take. And I wanted to see where that would go. And so I had done some drawings, and one looked very interesting, and I wanted to see if I stuck with that one thing, where could I go in that? And that's when they were actually looked like roads or the sunset. And then the monochromes came from turning the colored ones around in my studio and seeing them in this position. I'm not sure if I answered the question. I can tell you that putting my name in was also something that, like, at the time, I mean, artists are always signing the front of their work, but like in my peer group, that was kind of a no-no. Like, the ego of the artist shouldn't be front and center, shouldn't even be a part of the game. And I was like, man, you conceptual artists have the biggest egos of all. Anyway, I was just like, if you want to know who made this, why don't you just look at the front of the painting?
When I first looked at them, I was wondering how much time you spend for each of these paintings. Because for me, working as an artist, I always imagine kind of the sheer process of making a work. And it was beautiful in the studio visit. You showed us what you're working on right now.
Right.
So it's interesting, the process and the time as work unfolds. How long do you work on a piece like this?
I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. You know, if they've got the name, that takes significantly longer, because I paint around, and you'll see some more detailed ones. I paint around. I just love this. I love both of these paintings, but the diptych on the right, for me, was like, I actually got to do Jasper John flags.
Yeah.
You know, it's red, white, and blue. Like, look at that. It's one of my favorite paintings of all time. I don't know where it is. MG01.
They're gorgeous paintings. I really love those. And we are jumping here to 2004. And I'm showing some more of these.
So those are cardboard boxes that were shipped to the studio. That the butterflies I only painted in natural light, and there's some reasons for that. And so I was also living in my studio. So some of these are definitely pre-2004, these cardboard ones. But when the lights went off, those were so precise, the butterfly paintings, that I wanted to start another body of work in the dark or in the night, that where I could get my hands dirty, and where I could be messy, and I could be more of how we traditionally think of artists, like expressing themselves. And so that's kind of what spawned these. I used them, I take photographs and kind of use them as like an invite poster or something like that. Or I might put one in the back room, but they always felt very personal.
Yeah.
Work's done at the end of the day.
So now we're jumping 3 years to the blue paintings, which is kind of what you said before. There's certain threads that go through your work, your sculptural approach, the perspective approach. Blue paintings, light to dark. That was an incredible exhibition at Anton Kern.
Thanks. I really love this show. For me, it was one of the most perfect. I was really kind of in my prime painting these.
Look at this. This is incredible, no?
Yeah.
Did people what comes to mind, I always think about Barnett Newman somehow when I see your work. Is that some reference, or is that kind of a weird thought I have?
Well, with the zip down the middle, I think it makes sense. Barnett Newman was not a big influence for me, but I for sure see that. I could also say that Ad Reinhardt was not a big influence for me. It was the abstract expressionists that I was more interested in. And in some ways, maybe this is a blend of the two in terms of the paint is thick, unlike Barnett or Ad Reinhardt. But the thrust is more like them. One of my big influence was Mondrian, and at the old MoMA there had been a retrospective there that had been very important, as well as the Richter show had been also very important.
Yeah, when we got the first piece into the collection then, and when I was in New York, we had a discussion actually amongst the curators whether we thought it was abstract work or not. Because of course the title, Large Colored Butterflies, 9 Wings,
right,
associates something figurative.
Yes.
And I remember that it was really an animated discussion. Is it abstract? Is it not abstract? What do you say about what do you say? How do you describe?
I mean, there's abstraction and then there's non-representation.
Yeah.
I thought of those drawings as they were non-representational. For me, they were lines, like a Kandinsky after he stopped the landscape, or but I was still able to look at them, and they had relations to butterflies, and I like calling them butterflies. But like Barnett Newman has some big names for, you know, Stations of the Cross for his monochromes. Like, are they Stations of the Cross? Sure, but they're still, you know what I mean.
That's really great to hear you describe them yourself. And we now go to the Kunstmuseum in Thun. And we have a first one. We go perhaps to the next slide. So we see that we saw before. And I think it's perhaps we go to the next and to the last one of those.
I mean, it was great. Like, I love museums that let some of the nature in. So I was able to have like this orange painting with the green underpainting. And then there were red roses out there and black swans and the incredible blue water from the mountains rushing by. And this was an old hotel, and I was able to do some of my blue, some of my red, some of my orange, some of my sculpture drawings, and just meander from one room to another. I got really lucky that I was invited to do this show.
Unfortunately, I missed that show. When did you start? What was in your own chronology, what was the first piece you put in?
I don't remember. It had to be 2008, 7 or 8, because there are blue paintings in this show, and that was 2007.
Yeah.
I don't remember how the show opened.
Yeah. Question is perhaps a little bit oriented when you do a show like this. This is basically 10 years after you do the sign exchanges, a little bit more. You started the sign exchanges 93 to 98. So yeah, approximately a decade later. Did you include those? So did you propose to include them? Because you kept them. You kept even the large scale sculptures.
Right. I do not think I put them in the show. It's possible maybe it was in the catalog, as well as some of like the drawings I did in high school may have been in the catalog, but they also may not have been. I don't remember. I don't remember.
I think it's always so compelling to see a chronology and to always, that's why I like large retrospectives. It's more than just the summary of all the single works. It really gives you a completely different perspective of an artist's career, of an artist's work. We go to Anton Kern Gallery now. think that was also a really groundbreaking show in 2011, 9 Faces. We have 5 slides of this. Perhaps we go to the next. That is also an installation view. And then we have 3 works. This feels like this feels really like a departure from where you were before. It feels like a very different way of painting. Have a look here at the monumental scale at the gallery. And then if we go and have a close-up to the work, it's a very, very different way of painting. It's a very different approach. What brought you there?
Well, you know, like the cardboard mass, I was able to work at night, not using natural light. Some of the leftover paint that happened from when I finished a butterfly would sit around, and so I take a small brush and just start making little faces on cardboard that was around, and then wondering if that could actually be a painting. Like, could it be a big painting? Could it be a medium painting? Could I do that? And then doing that a little bit and liking them, and they were very much like there were some similarities to work I had done when I was younger. And then I broke my arm and I could no longer make the butterflies. I just couldn't. I could barely lift my arm.
You had a skiing accident,
months.
Right? You had a skiing accident, right?
Yeah. I hit some ice. There was no like almost falling. I hit some ice and I went down. And I just cracked my shoulder, arm, rotator cuff. And so these paintings I was able to do. The other ones were always had to be wet into wet. There was no stop and start. It was like, once I started on the butterflies, I had to go until it was done. And so these started as I could do a part here and a part there. And then I can't say I never looked back, because I've always regretted not going back into the butterflies, because I still feel like I left so much on the table with the monochrome. But that's what led to this, you know, and then this became a whole new way of working in a different language.
You said there is a difference between abstract and not representational. When you look at a work like this, you called the exhibition at Anton Kern 9 Faces.
Yes. And they are faces, right? There are those faces. It was also like, you know, are you really gonna make faces like Picasso? Are you really gonna use, I mean, this only has 2 eyes, but multiple eyes and distorted noses? Like, you're gonna go, like when you are a young artist, the first thing you do, everything I say, like, is none of it's 100%, right? But the first thing you do to declare yourself part of a risk taker or avant-garde is to put eyes in different, because it's weird to have that. But you get older and you realize that that's just one way. So it was like something that seemed very like an exhausted way of working. Can I go into a place that is exhausted and find something interesting there? And so that the challenge of that, and I don't even know if it's the challenge, like, can I overcome that? It's just like it was so uncomfortable to go there that it seemed like,
I think it's interesting. The next, what we're gonna look at is a bronze mask series. And I think perhaps we have here 3 work close-ups. Perhaps we go to the next one, because you had 9 faces, and then here you have the bronze mask, of course, a mask as referencing faces. And perhaps we see the install shots. Go to the next install shot. I love this picture because this is a bit about, it reminded me of the store when you had the exchange in the store.
Oh, yeah.
Anton's gallery, you just have it up and you have a storefront. And then the way how you display those, their encounters, they are standing in front of you, against you. They are like persons, basically, right? They're like bodies. Go to
yes.
And then I think we have one more of these, yeah. Say a bit how you ended up with these sculptures, because I think that's fascinating.
Well, at some point I just decided to cast them. I can't remember. It just seemed like at some point it was like, okay, at some point I'm going to cast them. And once I cast them, then I took the artist's hand away and then they just became structures in a way to paint on. And I allowed myself a certain kind of freedom in the painting of these bronze masks that I just have not allowed exactly in my paintings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's very like, so when you paint the nose, it's like you're really working it. It's fun. And then like the whole setup is there. Like you don't have to figure out where the eyes are going to be because it's bronze. The eyes are where the eyes are. The nose are where the nose is. And then it was really fun to paint those.
Yeah. And they were at the same time that you had the mask, the face paintings. And I want to go to the next, I want to go to Circus Circus. So perhaps we go to the next one. That was at the Kunstverein in Freiburg. That was later, that's 2014. And I really love the way how you installed those here. It really holds the space.
It's a former swimming pool.
Amazing, space is amazing. Do you want to say a bit about what you thought about this show and how you put it together?
Let's see. Well, I was invited to do the show. I can't remember if I was already working on the circuses. I sent out brought a bunch of bronzes that I planned on putting up top, and I brought them all up there and I took them all down because, you know, at some point with the faces, like before everyone was different, and I really enjoyed like the layering and the pattern making, and I wanted to find kind of like what I had with the butterflies. I wanted to have a motif and then exploit that motif. And so with the circus, that's kind of what I got. I chose a motif. I believe it had 2 overlapping eyes on the right and then 3 separate eyes on the left. And then the similar whip down the middle, or the spine down the middle. And then the nose goes out like this. And then kind of like the actors thing, you know, the smiley faces, there were 2 smiles that would go up like this and over. And then from there, I would just pattern out. And at least in the beginning, I remember it being pretty fun, just patterning them out. You know, and you just have to have faith that it's going to work out. There's never any plan to it. And so Circus Liquor, right? They're called Circus. In the middle of this, and actually, if you go back, if you go back one, yeah, that is the first painting I did after I got sober. So at some point, look, I crashed and burned with liquor. So it's like I just like didn't have a choice anymore. And this is the first painting I did once I got out of rehab. And I remember feeling so stiff, and I looked at the painting and I was like, it's so stiff, but I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true.
Very dynamic.
Yeah.
Incredibly dynamic. So let's go to the next one, because I think this is such and again, so the advertising Kunstverein Freiburg for this art association, that a non-for-profit, like a small museum, you did this show with. And this goes back to the announcement, to the sign exchange, we saw this beautiful picture of you in the liquor store where you even got access to the back room and the guns. So you are 20 years later doing a show, Circus Circus. What an amazing installation. I really like how you
Thank you.
This. What I want to jump into a very different territory, and we should just perhaps talk over while we watch a video, but perhaps the first minute we should just watch the video. And I hope Zoom magic is working and the video is running. Oh, it is. Great, and there's even sound.
Oh!
So beach balls were around because I had, you know, the girls were little then. It's not, oh, there it goes. The girls were little, and so we had beach balls and floaties for the pool or just to play around. And then I just started trying to kick it. Light posts. I hope your guys' reception is good.
Yeah, we can.
For like 3 weeks, every day, I try and kick that thing up there. But the light post is like a crown. And so it would hit the top, and as soon as it hit the top, it just would eject. She's trying to block me.
Is that a work of art, that video?
I think this was also kind of new, like, I mean, sure, insofar as like kind of everything is. I was doing this in Instagram, so I was publishing all of these. So it was very participatory, and I reached out into a larger, you know, arena. Like I had 2,000 followers, and people were watching me do this. Every day I would do it, and then I'd upload them. And so I'd never gone into like technology. And I had some galleries while I was doing it being like, can you cut off your lamppost and bring it in? And I was like, it was existing in this. It was existing at the time. It was real life. And, you know, it was also exposing a lot about myself. Like, I live in a huge mansion. You know what I mean? When I was doing the sign exchange, I was living in my studio with a hot plate. Now I live in a mansion, you know? I have a cook and a driver when I want. I have a pool. Like, what's it like to be a scrowl that comes down here, try and be an artist, and then you make a lot of money? Like, what's it like to be a person? You go from being a young person, and then you have kids. Like, what, like, so of course.
Oh my God.
One, I love sports.
Yeah.
I love repetitive. I love kicking balls. I love trying to do things like this. Like, this gives me so much pleasure. And I think there's the background of it being very revealing of my personal life and stuff like that. And so I'm aware of that while that's going on. Like,
but isn't it about artistic practice? You're always trying, but you never. For me, when I go to studio visits, and it's nothing negative, nothing critical, but I think for me, an artist is always trying to get there and succeeding by not getting there. So
yeah.
There's a certain driving and a goal, and it would be tragic if you arrive there, because then you wouldn't start trying and trying and trying.
Yes. I mean, I think that, of course, it's like over and over and over again, you know, until finally, and I did, and I think we'll see it, finally, I got it, you know?
This is from 2015.
Whoa!
It was a fascination that artists had, especially in that year. I remember that myself, with so many artists I worked with. 2015, Instagram basically exploded for the artist. How do you say you're socially shy and like, oh, I had a gallery, but I feel like that's not my Instagram gave you an outlet to talk to people without seeing them.
I mean, I'm an exhibitionist. You can be shy and be an exhibitionist.
Really? That's what you hit.
Plus, I'm in complete control, you know. But yeah, I had never even been on Facebook. I don't know that I've ever been on Facebook, but this was something like, Jen was doing it in bed, and I was like, what is that? Put that away, you know? And then figuring out how it worked. And then I was in, you know? And so this is in the glory days before it became a problem.
Yeah, yeah. And do you consider what you did on Instagram part of your work? Because it's kind of, I'm very, over the years, I would call Cindy Sherman a dear
Look
friend.
at that, like, girls are running back with a kite.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes! Yes!
congratulations.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Perhaps
Yes!
we all this year.
I mean,
I remember in 2015, I had a longer conversation in studio visit with Cindy Sherman. And I said, Cindy, I want to show you Instagram. And she said, oh, of course I know about it. And we talked about it. And then only like, I would think perhaps 2 years later, she started to see Instagram as a room or a space she could also work in.
yes.
So you do continue
Yes.
to do on Instagram part of your artistic practice, right?
Yes. Yes. Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. It's another studio to be creative and to do weird things and in ways that are different than maybe the studio is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And into the studio.
I love that we watched that together. That's really nice. But we will not stay here the whole day. We go further.
Nope. Let's do it.
Villa Malaparte, and I'm doing a little bit of a faster run.
Yeah, so Grotjahn asked me if I wanted to do a show at this house, and I had never been there, but it was my favorite domestic piece of architecture in the world. And so I said, can you just give me 2 days? I'm pretty sure I have to say yes. And so I said yes, and I wanted to stop painting the faces, and this was a cool enough project that I allowed myself to try and do something new.
I think this is such an incredible installation. For how long were you there, Mark?
We were there for like a week, and we were staying a little bit down the coast, and so we had a boat that would take us here every day, and we'd install, and then we'd eat, and then we'd swim, and then we'd go upstairs, and we'd meditate, and we'd install. It was quite an experience. And I left that there.
Oh, gorgeous. It's kind of, Villa Malaparte is kind of making everything look modern. It doesn't make it look contemporary. It makes it look modern, which is such an interesting architecture that it transforms everything that's around it. Really fascinating. It's beautiful. We might go to the next in the interest of time because we...
Sure.
This is 2018.
Yeah.
That is New Capri, Free Capri from 2018. This work, when I first saw it, there, of course, and I'm stating the obvious, there's an incredible aggression in it in a way. And when I first saw it, I thought about Fontana, I thought about modern art, but of course, perhaps that's just a first impression. When you talk about these works, how would you describe them? This was a fascinating show. I really loved that show.
How would I talk about them? I mean, one, the work that I was doing at Malaparte, it was abstract. I wanted to make abstract paintings, but the early works still really referenced a lot of the eyes from the faces, although there was more scraping and there were other creative, like smaller moves. And for this body, I wanted to get out of the eyes, and so the marks in the background went from one side to the other side, and kind of like waves back and forth. And then at some point, like I started making these slugs, and I was like, are you really gonna put that on the front of your painting? In the same way that I was like, are you really gonna like put your name on these kind of pristine monochromes? Are you really gonna put these pieces of paint on the front? And at first I started laying them down as kind of like poetry, like script. And then I started gritting them out. And So those are, yeah. I mean, that's all I can say. It's a continued investigation into making paintings, a continued investigation into pattern and color. I think color and line, it comes back to color and line and doing it in a different way.
How do you make these? How do you make these?
Well, it's cardboard mounted on linen. That is done for me. There's an acrylic, just one kind of color put down. And then, so like that green one might start yellow. It comes to my studio and then I coat it with a green. I scrape it down. I start putting lines. I scrape away what doesn't make sense. And then I keep going.
Does it start horizontal or vertical?
Vertical. I mean, I have them on easels so I could turn them around, but you know, it's interesting because I heard Mary Weatherford talk about her paintings, the ones that she does with the neons, and saying like, the painting doesn't get finished until the neon gets put down. And for me, the painting, first I put down the lines, and then to finish the lines, I splatter, and then to finish that, I add the slugs. And so they're different stages. And for me, putting the slugs on the grids is kind of like, it's how I get to close the painting and finish it. And now I'm actually moving away from the slugs and going more back into these works in the present and the way that I'm painting right now.
Yeah. So let's go to see some studio views, because this is your real studio, not the studio at home.
Right.
And then I think we have one more. Even the smaller works, because for me, it's always such a fascinating question. When I visited Joe Bradley, the painter, I asked him, do your paintings start vertical or horizontal? And he says, Klaus, open your eyes. There's a footprint on it. Of course, they were on the floor. And with your large scales, especially with the ones, I felt the last body of work that's from 2018 that we looked at in the Gagosian show, I think that's, your painting for me is always very sculptural. In the drawing, I somehow consider sculptural, because then when we had this discussion, we acquired that piece. Of course, when you look very, very closely to these pencil drawings, even they have a sculptural quality to them, and the monochromes have. But I felt in that last body of work, the sculptural quality comes to a new level because of the thickness, the cutting, the texture. I think it reaches a different level of, somehow, even when you said 9 faces at Anton Kern and you had the face mask, somehow they feel like as if they, it's a synergy between the paintings and the sculptures in a certain way. So I'm really fascinated by those. So now you showed us a bit what you have in the studio. What are you envisioning next?
I'm still continuing with the capris. I would like to do some large horizontal capris. I want to have a show of these works like you see here under glass. I would like to do a show of just that work. I love looking at those. For some reasons, putting the glass in front actually, I think, brings the viewer closer. I would like to have a show of that. I would like to have a show of some really large kind of horizontal, you know, the grand work. And I'm interested in, I'm dipping my foot into architecture.
It's fascinating, really. Yeah. It's amazing how open and generous you are speaking about your own work and speaking about how you make it and what your thought process is. So a huge thank you, Mark. Thank you for such an incredible, insightful studio visit. And we really saw your studio, so I'm really grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.